On the one hand, this is good news. It passed by 289 votes to 230. But is there trouble ahead? Will we expect to see the lawyers and the Lords once again trying to drag this law down?
Well, I think we will see some changes and difficulties for the government in the House of Lords. There are two elements that the House of Lords can now undertake. The first is that they can make serious amendments to the government, and they can do so in such a way that they can weaken some of the key points. Maybe they'll weaken the aspects about going to Rwanda. Maybe they'll weaken the 28 days detention. Perhaps they'll go against the kind of concept that the European Court of Human Rights can be challenged by the government or even ignored. If they do that, that creates massive problems for the government. They could also start putting in clauses that enable immigration lawyers like myself, but those who represent say the trade unions, the non-government organisations, all those in camps, that gives them the options to try and challenge them in the courts in the future. The final one, which I don't think will happen, is if the House of Lords actually voted the bill out and overruled it completely. They can still do so at this third stage, and that would create a huge problem for the government. It would mean that they'd either have to bring it back in again in the next parliamentary session, which would really scupper Rishi Sunak's plans to stop the boats.
David in there. OK, David, let's bring you in now, if I could. As a human rights lawyer yourself and a keen spectator of the history of these challenges, are you expecting judges, QCs, charities, NGOs to kind of get on their haunches and go to war on this one?
Yeah, good afternoon, Martin. I think Stephen set out very well the challenges the bill's going to face as it goes through the Lords. But let's assume that it does get through the Lords in some form. Once that happens, it's got the courts it needs to get through. Obviously, the domestic courts, we've seen that the bill may try and disapply some judges looking at challenges that it's incompatible with the European Convention. So already you have probably lawyers ordering very expensive sports cars. I mean, it's going to get bound up in courts, first of all, domestically, then in the European courts, and it's going to go on and on and on. And much like we saw with Rwanda, it's over a year on, no one's gone there. The government must have known at the time that would face legal challenges. And this law is at the start, the government already said that they cannot confirm that it complies with existing international laws. We've already seen the European Court of Human Rights and the UN Refugee Agency basically say that there are issues and non-compliance with those laws. So we already know that the government is effectively speeding into a brick wall, which will be met with legal challenges unending, I think. So, I've said it before, I don't see any people going to Rwanda in this term of the government.
OK, Stephen, heading back to you. Don't know about you, mate, but I'm starting to get Groundhog Day about all this. It's starting to feel like the great Brexit battalion once again. The Lords, the lawyers, the same foes, the same people laying down the tax on the road, so to speak. What do you think this would do about public trust in the Lords and in lawyers? And do you think inevitably this may lead to pressure to leave the ECHR?
Well, I have seen the pressure on people looking at the Lords, looking at judges, looking at politicians and saying that there is a huge disconnect between our feelings, our votes and what they undertake to do. This is a part of a huge philosophical and political challenge that is going on, where there is a dominance across the Western world in the United States, the Democrats, some call it the socialists in the UK and other parts of Western Europe, which are challenging traditional conservative views, which include strong borders, strong police forces and control of our own economies through, say, lack of low taxation. And there's been successful victories for them. Brexit was an aberration for many of those on the left and the Liberals who believe that they can win back the powers that were lost there. And this is part of that battle of the hearts and minds of where government goes. And I think if Rishi Sunak is not able to push people who fall within the 28 days rules under the new illegal migration bill and are removed to Rwanda or any other country that might come in the future, then that is one less victory for those who believe in conservatism. And certainly it is a victory for those who believe in the modern form of autocratic liberal socialism.
David, coming back to you now, one of the sticking points is around changes to the modern slavery laws, which of course was introduced by Theresa May. She's complaining that they may be removed, but of course anybody who's been observing this knows that modern slavery actually was a great way of people coming into the country saying they were trafficked, and that meant they couldn't be returned.
Yeah, it's one of the. I mean, obviously there are people that have come and genuinely relied on protections that provided them, and what this will do effectively is remove those protections. So there will be genuine people that will be affected negatively because of it, but it also will stop, obviously, a lot of people abusing that as a loophole to get through that. So like I said before, there are so many issues. Once this legislation goes through, there's not much time left in the next general election, and I don't think it's going to have any real impact on protecting the human rights of the genuine people that come over and stopping the boat. I really don't think it's going to do that. Not in this term of this government.
OK, Stephen, coming back to you, as an expert on the types of ways that people are schooled and they're advised on how to game our system. One of the things there we talked about is modern slavery. Another one that's a sticking point in this debate is the detention of children, minors under 18s. But we know there have been huge concerns about people who aren't a child saying they are. So even with this law as it stands, there are still loopholes, aren't there, to allow illegals to game our system?
Well, you've got to look at law in general. I mean, no law is actually perfect. And when you draft legislation, however good the government legal department are, and they've done a tremendous job, I must say, in being able to try and reduce and narrow some of the loopholes that are being used by those who are economic migrants or illegal migrants rather than genuine refugees. They've done a tremendous job, but no law is perfect. And all you're simply trying to do when you pass new legislation or add amendments is to try and work out where the people smugglers or those who support them are actually trying to change the law or use loopholes to enable them to get through. The modern slavery provisions are certainly the types of clauses that have been introduced by the government to deal with that particular loophole. But as David said, there will be losers to this. There will be genuine people who are facing the modern slavery issues that come over that might have more difficulty. So that's the great balance. That is why you have legal teams of both sides, and that's why the government must have barristers and solicitors who represent them in the government legal department or who they outsource it to, that can challenge the law and ensure that it is read in the way that Parliament intends it to be.
OK, Stephen, David mentioned an excellent point there about it's unlikely this will get dealt with in this term of government anyway. There simply isn't enough time before the general election. But how important politically is this, Stephen, for the Conservative parties? They talk tough, but they fail to control the borders. If they don't do something now, surely the writing's on the wall for them. They're finished.
It's incredibly difficult and essential for them to actually succeed in at least trying to pass this legislation before summer and get some action. We do know that Suella Braverman has said that once the bill has passed the Lords and is now enacted in law, that she will try and move planes off to Rwanda and ignore the ECHO. And I think the reason they're doing that is for metrics. There are 2 points to this. First of all, is that it's known that the immigration issue and the channel boats is playing really well on the election that we're seeing at the moment in the local elections, but it's also playing well for those who are in the North, the Midlands and what's called the Red Wall, who are seeing that the government is attempting to do so. And that is why you also saw Rishi Sunak talking to Meloni, the president or prime minister of Italy, because she is also tough on immigration. They're trying to put metrics out so that it gives a good impression that they're doing the job and Labour won't.